are again. Alors merci. I really want to thank you for your engagement in this process. I remember when I was elected 12, 13 years ago now, we talked about water as being seriously one of the single most important responsibilities that a city has, a municipality has, to its residents, to ensure safe drinking water. And I know that presentation many years ago put the fear into me, but also the respect around the process. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight and pleased that all of you are here. So I'm going to turn it over to the clerk for roll call, and then we'll get started.
Mayor Bernadette Clement.
Présente.
Councillors Claude McIntosh.
Here.
Elaine McDonald.
Present.
Sid Gardner.
I'm here.
Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
Caroline Hébert.
Présente.
Councillors Modeste Prel.
Present.
Glenn Grant.
Present.
Justin Townsend.
Present.
And Councillors Bennett and Bergeron are going to relay the item.
Thank you. So I'll turn it over to my CEO to start presentations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you again this evening to Council for joining us for the training with respect to standard duty of care, the Safe Water Drinking Act responsibilities. The training is required as part of our certification for our water plant. I would like to hand it over to Mr. Bill DeWitt to introduce our guest and to also introduce some of our faces that are here joining us this evening from our water plant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Mr. Perry DeCola he's actually from Belleville, and he's the General Manager of Environmental Services at Belleville. Belleville is a 50,000 people, so they're quite similar size to Cornwall. And he's been commissioned by the Walkerton Clean Water Center to present this course tonight. Perry's been in the field, in the water treatment field for about 25 years, and he's done just about everything according to his bio, including design, management, maintenance, SCADA systems that relate to water equipment, water treatment equipment and facilities. Perry is an environmental technologist, holds an environmental technologist certificate, and he is a Class 4 water operator. And Class 4 water operator is one of the highest, or is the highest level of water operator, the highest level of licensing that you can obtain. Perry's also involved with a lot of committees, such as the Eastern Ontario Water Works Association. He's been the Secretary Treasurer there. And he's also involved with the American Water Works Association, as well as the Ontario Water Works Association. So I think we have somebody here who's quite knowledgeable in this topic, and I'll ask Perry to come to start the presentation. Before we do that, though, Perry, I'm going to just introduce some of the staff here that's from that are involved with our waterworks operation. So I think everybody knows Carl Goodwin, who's the manager of environmental services, and we also have Owen O'Keefe, who's the supervisor of the water purification plant. And with us, we also have Dave Kuhn, who's a environmental technician, but he's also our water quality, our QMS, our quality management system rep. And we also have with us Robert Rathbun, who is worked for Public Works, and he's working with our backflow prevention program throughout the city.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Do we need the microphone?
Yes.
So I have to stand here the entire time?
You can sit.
You can, okay.
Works better if you sit.
It
I
bends.
like to walk. I like to talk.
Oh,
I'm Italian, so it's very hard for me not to just stand still. But I should move this so that your worship can see me a little better, in case I was being blocked.
you're fine.
So, my name is Perry Nicole. I am the General Manager of Environmental Services, and I have been doing this for about 25 years. I feel your pain. I understand. It's wonderful fun. Tonight, we will laugh, we will cry. We're going to kiss the next 3 hours goodbye, but we'll hopefully have some training sessions so that you'll be able to take something away and learn about the importance of water. So, tonight we're going to be dealing with responsibilities under the standard of care. And again, if you have to get up, just please do so. Don't worry. I do need a timekeeper though, someone to keep me on time. Throw things at me, whatever it is, because at 7 o'clock the stones will be hurled if I'm not done. So, what are we going to try and cover today? Well, the materials that you have your presentation manual, and then there's a guide that's available online. And that's a reference guidebook for elected officials. The course outline, the first part, we're going to deal with the introduction. We're going to look at legislation, the responsibilities, and the liabilities. Then we're going to deal with the multi-barrier approach. Now, I do want to say one thing. I'll say it to the clerk. Oh, you've got your light on your phone. It'll die fast if you don't. Sorry, OCD in me. You have the sign-in sheet. I do need that to be signed by everyone, so that'll just be passed around, and when it gets to an end, I'll bring it over to the other people in the room as well. So if we can just circulate that. One thing that we deal with, the second part under the introduction portion, is the multi-barrier approach. The multi-barrier approach, if you say something with enough confidence, tone, and impressive nature, whatever nonsense you say could sound impressive. The multi-barrier approach, if you listen to what the water treatment systems are, if you read the words, listen to the words, and eliminate the acronyms, what you end up doing is finding the meaning that are in those words. Words convey a huge amount of meaning, and they don't really have to sound too technical. The multi-barrier approach is just multiple barriers applied to eliminate risk. Which leads us to Module 2, which is risk management. So we'll look at basic risk management principles. And I heard conversations already about CCPs at the back of the room, and it puts a great big grin on my face, from ear to ear. And some people that are in our QMS understand it as well. And then we'll talk about common risk factors facing our drinking water systems. We'll look at case studies. We'll look at Walkerton, North Battleford, Saskatchewan, Flint, Michigan, and Stratford. And then the last section is, what do I do now? Achieving a culture of prevention, training, and succession planning. I don't know if you've looked at our industry, but I'm indicative of the industry. We're aging. We're getting towards the end of our careers. And we have to look to the next generation to be better, stronger, faster. That's that whole concept behind the QMS, which is the continuous improvement. In 10 years from now, I should look like someone who ate crayons in comparison to the people that are doing the job. They'll be that much better, stronger, and faster. Section 1. Safe drinking water is vital to the health and economy of our communities. If you want to be a third world city, eliminate your water system. Eliminate your water systems, both water treatment and wastewater treatment. That'll drive your economy into ruin. Ontario's residents expect, and they're entitled to, high-quality, safe drinking water. Through the chair, may I ask Councillor Grant a question?
Please go ahead.
Councillor Grant, do you feel confident drinking municipal drinking water in the province of Ontario?
All I drink.
That's all you drink. Do you drink water in Mexico?
I drink beer in Mexico.
Close enough.
That's an interesting discussion. You don't have the
No
faith.
interest in water in Mexico.
You have no water because you don't believe that it's safe. The water that I have
Nothing
here.
to do with that.
Oh, well, okay, because you're on vacation.
It's all
I
inclusive.
understand. Okay. Although this is cranberry juice, it's not. It's actually Cornwall water. So I have no hesitation in drinking that. when I travel from municipality to municipality, I know I'm gonna have something safe and effective. And municipal officials, councilors, managers, they have a direct legal responsibility for making sure that's safe. As you said, your worship, 12 years ago, which would have been one of the first standard of cares, just after the regulations came out, put the fear of God, because it's water. It's everywhere. Just because it's everywhere doesn't mean it's always high quality. How many would you take a drink out of the St. Lawrence River right now? Not until it passes through, not through Owen, but through his plant. There's 3 things to remember. The first thing that you have to remember, it's your duty to ensure safe drinking water. The statute, the standard of care is part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. That came in effect in 2002. It applies to all of those with decision-making responsibilities for a municipal drinking water system or those who oversee the system. In this entire room, is there anyone that doesn't have oversight capacity for our systems? Press? Okay, so you're the only one. Everyone else, other than him and I, have no responsibility for your system. You do. That's councilors, mayors, senior municipal officials. And the legal consequences for failing to carry out the duties that you're responsible for could lead to fines or imprisonment. The second thing that you have to do is, the first was, it's your duty. The second is you have to be informed. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to be informed. How many of you are an expert in water? Mayors and councils have terrible, terrible jobs because you have to make decisions on everything from water systems to playgrounds to winter management to strategic plans. If you had to be an expert in everything that you have to deal with, we could close all the universities in the country and send our children to the counselors for education. You deal with the people that are around you. You look to your service providers. Just a quick indication, does anyone do any home renovation projects?
Is your own home, you mean?
Maybe it's your own home.
Yeah.
Okay. Your worship, may I? Please. Well, have you ever put up drywall?
Yep.
Did you use screws?
Yep.
Did you put the screws in with a hammer or a sledgehammer?
Drill.
A drill. That's a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you use the right tool for the right job.
Right.
And that's where the senior management team that you have around you are important. And in the case of water, you've got Bill and Owen. And in fact, these are all tools. They're all big tools in your community. Oh wait, sorry, that just didn't come out right.
No.
No. But they're tools that should be effectively used. Use the right tool for the right job. I didn't mean to call them a tool. What I meant is that they are a tool at your disposal where you can use their knowledge and information to benefit you, to provide you what you need to get through. You seek the advice of those experts and use their expertise, and you act prudently based on what they give you. You should ask questions, and you should get answers. And the answers that you get should be ones that you trust. And the last thing that you have to be is vigilant. So you have a duty. You have to be informed, and you have to be vigilant. Because, again, go back to the counselor. Have you ever used a hammer and nail?
Yes,
Have you ever hit your thumb?
yes.
And were you paying attention when you hit your thumb?
Thought I was, but probably not.
Probably not. Usually when you lose that vigilance, okay, complacency, you always hear someone, I travel that road 1,000 times and I've never had an incident. Or I've done that 1,000,000 times. Why, I don't understand how that happened. It's because you have done it repeatedly. And when you do something, it becomes part of rote memory. Have you ever driven down the 401 and thought, how did I get here? It's a scary thought. And you wonder why they're making our cars autonomous now. Complacency can pose the greatest risks to our system. Never simply assume that all is well with a drinking water system. We all know what happens when you assume. And the health of your community depends on diligence and prudent oversight. You can't take a day off. You can't say, I don't feel like it today. You're always on. How many of you receive complaints from customers or citizens at odd hours of the day and night? You have received the occasional email. You're always on as well. And if you don't, you won't be back. First question, aside from standard of care, do you have any other oversight responsibilities as a mayor and council? Well, I'm going to jump in on this one. And what I'm going to say is, yes, you do. You do the budgetary process. That is an oversight responsibility. Do you hire senior managers? That is an oversight responsibility. If you're making the decisions on building, expanding, making something better, you have those oversight responsibilities, which again puts you in place with the standard of care under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Under Section 11, duties of the owner and operating authority. Section 11 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, 2002, describes the legal responsibilities as owners and operators of a municipal drinking water system. It's been in effect since 2002, so this isn't new. There's no escaping it. Owners and operating authorities are responsible for ensuring that drinking water systems, A, meet drinking water quality standards and are operated in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act and its regulations. So we have to meet an act. We have to make sure that the water meets those quality standards. And they always meet those standards. Now, one thing I always like to think about is that a standard is always a minimum. Standards aren't excessive. They're the least that you can do. My father was a wise man. He never said to me once, Perry, aim for the curb, and if you flop on the sidewalk, you did good. He always said to aim higher. The standard is the absolute minimum threshold that we can do to provide safe drinking water. We have to ensure that our facilities and our systems are properly maintained. And our staff, and they're supervised, and they're qualified, and that we have trained people doing the jobs. And we have to comply with the regulations. There's requirements for sampling, for monitoring, testing, notification, and reporting. Because the fundamentals of Walkerton came down to one detail. Your worship, if I lie to you, how long will I be a liar in your eyes?
Forever?
Forever. And that's what happened in the case of Walkerton. Would you assist me with a little visual? You have a glass in front of you.
Yep.
Take a drink.
It's Diet Coke, though.
Okay, stop. By the way, I put X-Lax in that Diet Coke.
Oh no.
It's going to be a crappy night, isn't it? No pun intended. Okay, now let's redo that exercise. Your worship, can you take a drink of that glass?
No way.
Pretend you don't know that. By the way, I put X-Lax in that glass. Whose decision is it to drink it now?
Fine.
It's yours. In the case of Walkerton, what happened was they took away people's fundamental right to make a decision. They took away people's abilities to protect those that are part of their family because they didn't sample, they didn't monitor, they didn't test, and they didn't notify and report when there was a problem. Every single one of us in here has someone that they love. And if you were thinking about it, and I took the ability away from you to protect those that are important to you, would they find all the pieces of me? Probably not. That's the fundamental job that our water systems have to perform.
Reading that report, the MNR was also negligent because they didn't check to see what reports were coming from Washington.
Through the chair, you're right. There was complacency at every level. And that's where the problem lied. People just didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't do that minimum. Just do their job. They didn't even carry that out. Section 11 says that's what you have to do, and if you fail to do it, Section 19 comes in and it gives a liability, and it's specific legal responsibilities for decision makers and those that oversee the drinking water systems. It's been in force since December 31st, 2012. That put the teeth to the legislation. It's not stop or I'll yell stop again. It's stop or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to have a very large provincial offences order, or POO as they call them. It's not good to be in POO. It requires what Section 19 says, and this is what you have to live up to. It says that it requires a level of care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would be expected to exercise in a similar situation. Hey, wait a minute, we brought the bar down just a bit, didn't we? We're only asking you to act prudently, that the way a prudent person would react in a similar situation. May I go back to Councilor Grant again? Councilor Grant, if I don't give you information, or if I lie to you, as I had lied to Her Worship, if I lied to you and provided you with information that was false, and you made a decision based in good faith, are you really responsible for that decision?
Well, I should have done my own due diligence.
But there's only so much that you can do, right? Because
So I
again,
rely on you.
you were relying on me. That's right. Because you have to act in honesty and competency and with integrity to the information that you're provided, and act in that manner. Which means, as councils, remember how I said it sounded kind of rude, but you got all these big tools in the room? These tools that are in the room are a layer of protection for you. They're the ones that vet it. May I ask, what level of license do you have?
I have a 3.
You have a level 3 for distribution.
Distribution.
Howard, what level of license do you have? Class 4 water treatment. These are your experts. They're the ones that understand what's going on. And taking their information and acting honestly and competently and with integrity gives you a layer of protection from Section 19. Who does the standard of care apply to? Well, it applies to the owner. And the municipality is the owner in this case. If the municipal system is owned by a corporation, other than the municipal corporation, then every director and officer of that corporation is responsible. And the last one we don't need to worry about because it doesn't apply to you. A provincial officer can lay a charge against a person to whom the standard applies. So the standard of care under the Safe Drinking Water Act, if it applies to you, a Ministry of Environment inspector or an enforcement, an investigation branch inspector can lay a fine against you. And it can be at a maximum $4 million, plus up to 5 years imprisonment. You really, 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 really have to go off the rails to get to that level of territory. Actual penalties would be decided by court based on the level and severity of the consequences of what you were making a decision on. The multi-barrier approach, again, as I said, if you say it with enough conviction, authority, and passion, whatever nonsense I say could sound impressive. The multi-barrier approach covers source water protection, treatment, distribution, monitoring, and management. It's multiple barriers. If you think of it like a hockey team, you got your front line. You got 3 people up front. You got the defense, and then you got the goalie. And if you're talking about the Maple Leafs or the Senators, well, really there's nothing in the way for the opposing team to score a goal. Sorry.
Eight.
Detroit fan. Old school. A failure of a single barrier doesn't mean that it'll lead to a disaster. Historically, diseases and outbreaks have happened when multiple barriers have failed. If we use it in the automotive context, start thinking about it. We didn't have seat belts in cars a long time ago. Then we got seat belts. Then we got airbags. And now we have autonomous stopping systems and braking systems. So what we've done is we've put many things in place to prevent people from getting hurt. It's a multiple barrier. We have Amber Alerts on our phones. So if there was a big storm that was coming through, we don't get the same destruction, or we get the same destruction, pardon me, but we don't get the life and toll because we've put multiple barriers in place so that people can get their information multiple ways. That multiple barrier system in water protects from source to tap to make sure that people can make informed decisions. The source water protection. Source water protection plans are mandatory for the municipal residential drinking water systems within the province of Ontario. Do we have a source water protection area here? Through your conservation authority? There's a couple of places that don't, and they're in Eastern Ontario. I've done 19 of these sessions so far this year in Eastern Ontario. And when I'm up in the Pembroke, Renfrew area, they don't have, it's the only area that doesn't have it. So it's an unusual one, so the next couple of these slides confuse people up in that area. Plans are being implemented to manage the risks to quality and quantity of municipal drinking water systems. Now, you're taking your source from the St. Lawrence River. What are the odds that it'll go dry? Probably nil. But if you had a well, could a well go dry? That impacts that quantity of water and the decisions that you make and how they impact that water. Would you want to put your sewage plant upstream of your drinking water plant? Sometimes it happens.
It's in the report. It was done.
It has been done.
Stupid.
We'll see North Battleford, Saskatchewan. It's a wonderful, wonderful demonstration. Municipalities are responsible for implementing many of the policies. So you put things in place for planning. So you've got IPZs, which are intake protection zones, and you have little signs along highways saying that you're entering an intake protection area or a source water protection area. You might limit the application. You have direct influence as a municipality for planning. Should you put dumps down by the water? Should you put fuel depots down by the water? Limiting the things that damage your source water. And failure to implement those policies could put your drinking water at risk. Now, Bill 66 that just came out, the cut the red tape, okay? CELA, which is the Canadian Environmental Legal Association, points out that it gives you safeguards away from certain aspects that are in that. It says that you can build as long as it's going to provide a certain number of jobs. It eliminates the source protection aspect of it. It doesn't touch the Safe Drinking Water Act. So if you made a decision that a reasonably prudent person would make, may I ask the councillor?
Please.
Councillor Herbert? If you knew that was a reasonable assessment that you're going to put something in that could jeopardize your water system, did you act in good faith? No. And we're so far down the road now, and we don't have protection from the Safe Drinking Water Act. We have it from the Ontario Water Resources Act, but not the Safe Drinking Water Act. Continued. New or expanded municipal drinking water systems in a source protection area is subject to Regulation 20518 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which says owners must ensure that these systems are included in local source protection plans. So if you got a plan in place and you put something else into it, you got to make sure that it gets updated in your plan. Because if you don't, is that continuous improvement? No, and I keep looking back because your job is what? QMS. That's that quality management system. And that's the person that continuously drives continual improvement. What have we done? We'll take a look at those slides coming up. Source water protection, there's an information atlas that's available, interactive mapping tools. It shows areas that are vulnerable. You want to eliminate activities around areas of vulnerability. Materials are available through Conservation Ontario. I don't know if they have any money left because they got half chopped. And Legislative training is provided by the province for appointed risk management officials and inspectors, and that is through your conservation authority. On the treatment side, the treatment processes range from simple disinfection, so you got a ground well, where you just throw a little bit of chlorine at it, to a highly specialized complex technology. And when we deal with a surface drinking water system, like you guys do, that's where you get to the pinnacle of the treatment process, because you have to deal with everything that's in that water. None of you would drink straight from the St. Lawrence. Well, you would if you don't mind having bloody diarrhea, getting sick and vomiting. But most people don't like that. Water treatment plays a critical role in the removal and inactivation of pathogens. You see, pathogens cause disease. When you're exposed to a pathogen, you're going to get sick. And the most common one, we hear about bacteria. And the problem with the pathogens is that they get into our system, and our bodies are like a wonderland for them. It's the right temperature, there's lots of food. It's got this really cool log ride. Anyhow, sorry, I digress.
Well, you just quoted John Mayer.
Right.
I know,
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, that's
Sort
okay
of-
then.
That's super cool.
Okay. Now, the problem with the pathogen is, there's a simple concept. When we eat, you know what we must do? We must excrete. So when something comes in, something has to go out. We always hear it's the metabolic byproducts. It is the life cycle byproducts. They're wastes. For us, it's poop. So basically, the bacteria, the pathogens that cause disease in us, they eat and they excrete. And the material that they excrete is something that our bodies cannot handle. When my daughter was in grade 7 and 8, we used to have seasons passes to Canada's Wonderland. That lets us get in an hour before everybody else. So we'd leave from Belleville. It takes about 2 hours to get to Maple, and we'd go in and get into the park, get in there for 9 o'clock. But being a municipal employee, I have a tendency to drink 2 large double-doubles on the way down. So the very first thing that I must do when I get to Canada's Wonderland is use the bathroom, much to the dismay of my daughter, where she goes, "Oh gosh, Dad, can you be human?" Now, if you go in the bathrooms at 9 o'clock in the morning before the park opens, they're incredibly clean. They're so clean you could eat off the floor, but don't. They'll call security because it's really creepy, okay? But by 5 o'clock at night, those bathrooms are disgusting. And is it because the staff's incompetent? It's just that there's too many people inside the park using it. That's like the pathogens. They reproduce within our body because it's the right temperature, there's lots of food. And they produce a waste product that our body can't flush out, which makes us sick, causing diarrhea and vomiting in a way to evacuate from our system. And treatment, what that does is it pulls the material out. There's bad pathogens and bacteria, E. coli, Salmonella, Legionella. And then there's some other ones that are out there in surface water only. It's Cryptosporidium and Giardia. Cryptosporidium, once it develops this hard protein oocyst shell on it, you can put it in household Javex, it's not going to touch it. The only way to get it out is to physically remove it from the equation. So you got to take it out through a flocculation and coagulation process, where you coagulate, bring all the stuff together, and flock gets it into a bundle, like sheep. And then the other one is Giardia. More common name is beaver fever, not Bieber. Causes the same effect: bloody diarrhea, bleeding of the ears, vomiting. But Giardia is out there, and it's one of those other pathogens that we have to deal with. An effective treatment process eliminates those risks from our system and prevents the recontamination. So we get rid of the stuff. We have things in our plants called CT, which is a contact time. It's actually in milligrams per liter times time in minutes. And what it is the amount of time that chlorine has to interact with the water to kill off the pathogens. Your Worship, would you indulge me to allow me to, oh yes, to steal Owen?
Yes,
Owen, come in, please.
our class 4.
Class 4, yes. So this is where it's even...
Love him.
It's more fun. So Owen is a disease-ridden varmint. He's a pathogen right now, okay? Now, I am chlorine, and what I have to do, after I've removed most of the pathogens through the coagulation and filtration process, there's still some that gets through. That's where chlorine has to come intact. And that's where you have that contact time, the concentration in milligrams per liter times time in minutes. Can I give you a quick hug? Oh. He's accepted. You heard that. That was a nod, yes.
Consent, yeah.
Not too bad. Eh? But you see, the problem is that chlorine has to act over time. So what it does is it gives the hug, and it holds on. You feel like you're gonna die now, Owen. The longer I hold on, the more you want to die. And that's how the chlorine's working inside. Thank you, Owen. You gotta have fun. You gotta have some fun. Thank you, Owen. But that's how the chlorine interacts. And that treatment process, that provides you with your CT. That gives you that interaction to get rid of the pathogens so that they don't go out into our distribution system. And the distribution system distributes the water to our customers. Water is only safe if quality is maintained to the customer's tap. However, utilities are responsible for the safety of customers to the property line. When it goes past the property line, that's when the Ontario Building Code comes into play. It's part of the building code at that point. We can't control what happens in the customer's house. What could be there? I don't know. Could be bears. I don't know. On their side of the equation, they run it. We don't know. On our side, we have to understand. Old infrastructure creates leaks. It can be a point of entry. Your Worship, may I ask Councillor Hollingsworth, because I hear he goes to extreme lengths with a joke. May I ask him to participate?
Oh, somebody ratted me out here.
Excellent.
All right, let's go.
So, Councillor Hollingsworth,
Yeah.
if there's a hole in a pipe
Yep.
and the water comes out of it, do you know what the sound of that would be?
No, I do not.
It's kind of like, psst. Can you do that for me? Psst, psst, psst. Okay. And if we inverted the pressure and suddenly we had a negative pressure, that psst sound becomes, yeah, the draw in.
Okay.
You see, now, when we have pipes in the ground, if it's going psst, psst, the water's leaking out, right?
Yeah,
And you know what's also in the ground? Could the sewer pipes be there?
sure,
Could the sewer pipes leak?
probably.
They could leak. If the water pipes are leaking, the sewer pipes could leak too.
Sure.
The potential's there.
Yeah,
So if you have water mixing with sewage, you make poop soup, correct?
okay.
And then suddenly you have a pressure reversal and, no, you draw it in.
Okay.
Luckily, we put a material around the pipes, and our distribution people understand this. It's impermeable to water. It's called gravel, correct? Water can't travel through gravel? Oh, wait, it can.
What, am I missing something here?
Yeah, you see, that's the problem. Our pipes are not separated by 10 meters. They're usually in the same hole, separated by a minimum gap space of 50 centimeters. That's the minimum standard. So this much, that's the minimum separation in gravel. So that can turn into a, and draw back in. Terrible, terrible, terrible stuff.
It'd be an
See,
interesting meeting.
old infrastructure, as we get older. So, if I were to fall down, or a 6-year-old were to fall down, I probably would bear greater risk of injury. Fair?
Seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable.
Probably kill
The 6-year-old would be, if I fell on the 6-year-old, I'd kill him, but it would be a fair assessment that the 6-year-old would be able to recuperate and recover faster than I would. There's a infrastructure age issue. I've become more brittle with time. Our pipes are old. How old are some of our oldest pipes? May I ask?
In the order of like 75 to 100 years old.
75 to 100 years.
100 years old.
100 years old. Excellent, excellent. And I love this number because you got to remember, this is also my portfolio. And I love this demonstration. Can we see this? I want to let you know, in my world, that represents $1,500. For every 1 meter of pipe in the ground, that's the minimum budgetary number that I have to put into play to figure out how much it costs to replace it. In your system, you have 230 kilometers of pipe?
270 of them.
270. Wow. So 270, if you had to look at a total replacement cost at $1,500 per meter, so that would be 270,000 times 1,500. So you're looking at almost $400 million just for the pipes in the ground. Pipes in the ground don't have ribbon cuttings. You know why? Because they're in the ground. They're not very sexy. When you get done replacing a pipe, guess what it looks like? Exactly the way it did before you replaced the pipe. You don't see it. It's in the ground. 18% of all waterborne diseases and outbreaks have occurred because of failing infrastructure in your system, in the distribution. On the monitoring side, there's requirements for treated water compliance. Monitoring have increased significantly. It's true. We have to do a lot more in the way of checks and balances. Safe Drinking Water Act includes some fail-safe actions for everyone's protection, because it's kind of like that airbag. You get into the front collision, the airbag goes off. That's to protect you from having to hose off the dashboard from your brains. The intent is to protect your life. We have continuous monitoring of critical parameters such as chlorine or turbidity, because if you may indulge me, may I?
Please. Get ready for a hug.
Thank you. So, may I put my arm on the shoulder? Sure. Excellent. He's a big piece of dirt. In this example. The first time you've heard that, eh? Now, he's a piece of dirt. I'm a pathogen. I can hide effectively behind you. Dirt is a turbidity. A pathogen being able to be shielded. Can chlorine effectively hug me if he's in the way? No. So, if we have too much dirt in the water, that provides shielding for pathogens, which doesn't allow our system to work effectively. So, we have to monitor. If there's too much dirt coming through the plant, through the filters, they have to shut off. Those automatic shut-offs, and they'll sound an alarm, and that alarm will go, which brings your attention to the problem. And that really, an alarm should say, look at me. Because that's what we want it to do. We want a trained and skilled person to go out and see what's happening, what happened, and how can we fix it. Fair assessment. Thank you. Sorry, I won't call you dirty again, I promise. And then the last part's management. And management isn't just the tall foreheads. A regulatory framework must be effective. Ontario will take swift action for adverse water quality incidents. The owner and management staff must provide effective oversight to a drinking water system. Now, the management is a number of things. It's understanding what we're monitoring so that you know what you're dealing with. And when there's a problem, much like that glass, I put X-Lax in it, right? And if I didn't tell you I put X-Lax in it, it's a bad day for you. Part of the responsibility of management is informing when the system goes bad, so that people can make an informed decision to protect themselves and their family. And that's the biggest part of the management portion. The drinking water quality standard. Back here again. There's requirements for all municipal residential drinking water systems. Walkerton offers training on it. That's fair. But the owner is ultimately responsible for that system. It requires a written endorsement and commitment from the top management and the system owner. So the top management's on the outside level of the horseshoe, and the owners are on the inside horseshoe. It requires an endorsement because there's a financial commitment. There's a commitment of resources, and there's a commitment to move forward for continual improvement. So when the system is looked at, we look at it and say it's not a one and done. It's a living document. How can we make it better each and every year? How can we protect our citizens at the end of the day? And, Your Worship, may I ask Councillor Bergeron? I don't want to butcher it. Bergeron, may I ask?
Please.
Did you have concerns when you were 16? Like things that you were afraid of?
Sharks?
Sure. Are you afraid of the same things today? Have your concerns changed?
I'm still pretty sharp,
But you're getting better at it, eh? Your level of concern changes, and at different stages of life. When you were 16, you were worried about getting a date. No, you weren't? Okay, excellent. That says a lot. And then, as you have children, you worry about their safety and their development. When you have grandchildren, you worry about your grandchildren, how they grow. You, through the various stages of life, your responsibilities, your risks, and concerns change. Much like that happens in a water facility. In our distribution system that has pipes that are 7,500 years old that make sounds like, yeah. And our
Figured
water
I'd get
treatment
both of
plant.
them in.
Again, you will see that. Whenever there's a changeover in council, or if there's a change in the head of council, usually that will come back for you to look at, read the document, see it, feel it, see how it's changed and how it improves the way your system works. The quality management system, again, it requires evidence of commitment. It's ensuring that the quality management system meets the requirement. Because if you have a system that doesn't meet the requirements, you're not meeting the legislative needs. It's ensuring that the operating authority is understanding of those requirements. So you'll see a report that has 21 elements in it, and it'll detail all the things that you have to do. And it's got to communicating details of that quality management system. It's got to take it and send it out to the people that need to make decisions, both in the field and up here. And you have to provide the resources to maintain it so it continuously gets better. Risk management. Time? 5:05? 5:25. 5:25, excellent. Risk management. We're going to look at common risks to drinking water systems and how we can reduce those risks. Because we can never get rid of all risks, but we can mitigate them, bring them down to a level that's effective. Now, in our quality management plan, that's what our life is, that little circle. Your operational plan is part of your drinking water quality management system. The operational plan includes source water protection. How do we protect our source water? It gives a description of the system, so you figure out what actually do we own, and then you look at the risks. And the thing is, we plan. We figure it. We're great planners. Then we got to take that plan, and we got to go do it. And we got to check, did it work? And what didn't work, we got to say, you know what? 1, 2, 4, and 7 worked. But 3 and 5 and 6, can we improve on that? Yeah, let's plan. This is how we plan to fix 3, 5, and 6. Let's do it. Hey, I checked it. 1 doesn't work now. The whole key is that continuous circle. By going out, planning it through, doing it, finding out what's wrong with it. Because how many people have made a perfect attempt every time they go out to do something? Best laid plans usually get laid to waste. Or if you manage to get it 100%, you've waited 100 years to get it done. The whole point of continuous improvement is to learn from mistakes to get better, stronger, faster. We cannot achieve zero risk. That's a guarantee. Everyone wants zero risk. We can't achieve that. What we can do is bring the risk level to negligible. If we can bring it to negligible, we eliminate the threat that it provides to people. Through the chair? You don't worry about sharks now, right?
Not every day.
No. So if you went swimming in the St. Lawrence, you're not too worried about it, eh? Not right now, okay. But if you went swimming in a shark-infested tank, the risk level goes up dramatically. What we have to do, if we can eliminate those risks from us, then we eliminate them for the customer. Here's a question. Has drinking water made anyone sick in your community?
I'd say yes.
You don't know.
I don't,
You don't know. Because when you got 270 kilometers of pipe, what's that sound? Psst. And it could become, which means that you could have a localized issue someplace out in 270 kilometers of pipe. You don't know. Backflow prevention is important, especially on your industrial customers. Do you really wonder why there is a law or there's regulations in regards to embalming and funeral homes for backflow prevention and isolation from the system? Because you don't want to drink Steve, okay? If there was a backflow. Do we know if people...
Councilors Tondo is still eating. You guys okay?
Steve's delicious.
It did. Steve's delicious. Excellent, excellent. We don't know if our water's made people sick. The problem to it is the disease detection threshold. That's the problem. Has anyone ever had the 24-hour flu? Just a show of hands, please. There is no such thing as a 24-hour flu. What you had is food poisoning. That's what you had. You see, there's always a certain number of people that have endemic diarrhea, vomiting. Wonderful topics again, while councillors eating. Diarrhea. Mustard-colored diarrhea.
Oh my God.
Just gotta drag it out there, sorry. Now, that's always in the background. And it's not until we have a high enough number of people that we start looking towards the endemic issues of water. So it could be that the sandwiches that were provided tonight make people sick. So when the health unit goes out, they try to find something that you have in common. So you ate a sandwich, and you ate a sandwich, and you ate a sandwich, but these 4 didn't, and all of them are sick. So now, what did all 8 of them consume? And it usually takes a very large number to eliminate all the possible food sources, you know, picnics, barbecues, restaurants, coffee, to get down to a point where it becomes a fundamental. And the fundamental that everyone's exposed to is water. So it usually has a very high threshold before we figure out if water was the culprit. In the QMS, we look at risks, and we look at them through hazards, hazardous events, and the risk that they pose. So you have a hazard, and a hazard is an agent that causes harm. It could be physical, chemical, biological, or radiological. The hazardous event, because we got the word event after it, means when it happens to introduce the hazard. It could be a snowmelt. It could be heavy rain. It could be a, what's that pipe sound turning to? An inversion. And then there's a risk. And the risk is the likelihood that the hazardous event will allow the hazard to cause an adverse consequence. So when you put it all together, you get these risk matrices. And in QMS, it's elements 7 and 8. And I'll be honest with you. You see these people? The things that make them worried are the things that have to make you worried. It's those things that they're scared of should put fear into your heart as well. Because that's the thing that they're worried about controlling most. And that's what you need to worry about controlling most. The guiding principles on reducing risk. The following have to be recognized. Pathogens pose the greatest risk to people. Because if you're dead, it doesn't matter, right? And pathogens can make you dead. Pathogens create that greatest risk. Oh, by the way, there's usually a test at the end of this. I don't believe in tests. I believe in celebrations of knowledge. So you have to get at least 7 of the 10 questions on that celebration right to get your certificate at the end, okay? You got to have a robust multi-barrier. And I don't know, perhaps that first one could be a celebratory question. You have to have a robust multi-barrier. It's essential. Having those barriers in place help protect the citizenry. Trouble is usually preceded by change. Do you know how to do this? No. What could go wrong? Change usually precedes it. When we have an ice storm or the first snowstorm of the year, do we have an increased number of traffic accidents? And what do people always say? Did people forget how to drive in the snow? We live in Canada, for heaven's sakes. It's a change. It changed. The way that they were dealing with something now has changed, and their ability to respond has led them to an issue. Operators must be capable and responsive. So they have to know what they're looking at and be able to respond to it. The drinking water professionals have to be accountable to the consumer. At the end of the day, my job, their job, they're directly accountable to the consumers of their community. Not one of them wants to walk out there and figure out, well, let's see if you die today. That's not on their agenda. They never want that responsibility. And good risk management requires informed decision-making. Again, for you to make an informed decision, you've got to have good information coming to you. And that's how you mitigate your risks. What do you think? St. Lawrence got some pathogens in it? Has anyone ever had swimmer's itch from the river?
Yes.
That's a pathogen, by the way. Is that a commitment joke? Is it? I don't know. Okay. Again, that first comment was pathogens pose the greatest risk to human health. Pathogens cause disease. So if you're exposed to a pathogen, you will get sick. Other stuff, less of an outcome. We don't know for sure. Pathogens will make you sick. Pathogens are everywhere where humans and animals are found because they exist within our feces. E. coli, we've heard of E. coli? The old name for E. coli was fecal coliform. Fecal means poop. Pathogenic organisms are existing within our bowels, our lower intestines, our large intestine. They're not meant to be up here. We excrete, the pathogens come out. Animals excrete, pathogens come out because it's a fecal contamination. Pathogens are never far from water. People are by water, animals are by water. You got any geese? They make a wonderful bloom, don't they?
You're making a nice feast.
A feast, yes. And pathogens can be removed or inactivated. We don't destroy them all. The way that you think of, Your Worship, may I ask some councillors for assistance?
Please.
Okay. Councillor Dupel? Okay. So pathogens are done by three ways. If we physically remove them, that's great. But then chlorine also has to work. So the first way that chlorine works is, here's a shotgun. Take the shotgun. Aim the shotgun at my belly. Pull the trigger. Bang! What's going to be here?
Hole?
A hole. You know what's going to come out of that hole?
I'm not quite sure.
My insides. If my insides come out of my, if my insides come outside, am I going to live long?
Probably not.
Probably not. See, chlorine destabilizes the outer membrane of the microorganism, popping a hole in it, causing the insides to come outside. Councillor Gregg. Here's a needle and thread. Stitch my mouth shut. Okay, what can I do?
Can't talk.
I can talk, I just sound really stupid.
Yeah, as far as
What can I do?
you can't articulate, you can't open your mouth.
I can't.
You can't eat.
Like, if you say it's going to take a long time for me to die, I'll
Or
be
die.
disappointed. If I can't eat, I will die rather quickly because I'm very svelte. Chlorine interferes with the way that a microorganism takes food through its membrane or how it processes it. If it can't process its food, it starves and it dies. And the last way, Councillor Hollingsworth,
I know.
here's a pair of hedge clippers.
Okay.
We're not going there. It acts as a mutagen, interfering with the reproductive capabilities of the microorganism. Put those down. It interferes with the reproductive capabilities of the microorganism. So
Right.
when you're dealing with a disinfectant, you can blow a hole in it,
Right.
taking the insides out. You can stitch its mouth shut, starving it. Or you can give it the chop, not allowing it to reproduce. You see, because one pathogenic organism can produce 1 million copies of itself within 24 hours. So you can see how that could overwhelm your system.
Yes.
So, we inactivate or remove them. But those pathogens, they're dangerous. Here's some pathogens. And this is a pathogen summary by who? That's that rock band. They did Pinball Wizard. No, wrong one, sorry. got that wrong. That's World Health Organization. You've got the pathogen, and then you got the type and the persistence in water and resistance to chlorine. The first one is norovirus. Just a little hint, if it's got the word virus in it, it's a virus. Norovirus, I don't remember, do you remember the Norwalk flu? The poo and spew flu? That happened on a boat on Carnival Discovery, and it was the most joyous place in the world when you have 5,000 people with diarrhea and vomiting all out of enclosed space. But they got a free trip out of it, though. That virus persists a long time in water. It'll stay a long time in water, and it's moderately resistant to chlorine. Campylobacter and E. coli, those are bacteria. They'll last for like 7-8 days in water, naturally, but they have a low resistance to chlorine. So if we're putting the chlorine, it's like giving the hug to Owen. Makes him want to die really quickly. And then Giardia and Crypto, those are the protozoans. They're tough. They have long life expectancies in water. So Cryptosporidium can last years, lasts through a freeze and thaw cycle. And it's highly resistant. You can put it in household Javix, 3%, and not kill it. You put you with 3%, you're not going to last long. Pathogens pose a greater risk. Lesser risks, there's things like arsenic and selenium and fluoride and nitrate and lead. They pose health risks. We'll talk about lead with Flint. Many toxic chemicals like pesticides, that's site-specific. Anyone a farmer? Do you apply chemicals to your field?
Yep.
Does the farm next to you apply the same chemicals?
Generally.
If you're planting two very different products, though, say one was planting corn, the other might producing soybeans,
Right.
they would have different applications, right? So pesticides are usually site-specific. So if you have a specific pesticide, should it be there in our drinking water?
No.
No. And if we detect any of it, we got to say something, right?
Right.
Because the regulations have to be met. We put it on a very, 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 very conservative number because we don't know, because we just don't go testing pesticides on people to see how it reacts to them. There's laws against that in our world.
There's a river in Quebec, but there wasn't an animal, a fish, a frog that survived the chemicals that were coming off the farms. The river was dead. That's up north near Three Rivers.
And that's something that could be feeding people. That's what's scary. That's why we have to have that robust multi-barrier approach. Because again, human error, people will have releases. We had one in Quinte West just recently. There was a problem with a dam washed out a road. Shouldn't have happened, but it did. Human error is inevitable. It's going to happen. Multi-barriers, what they do is they provide escape hatch after escape hatch after escape hatch. They provide protection down the road. When you look at most of the multi-barrier approach and the way that we do things, we have redundancy upon redundancy upon redundancy. And the reason we do that is that you have all these ways to prevent the system from failing. The multi-barrier concept has been advocated for decades, and focusing on optimizing barrier performance, not just compliance. So if you're going to do something, don't just do it because you have to. Do it because if you optimize it, what that'll do is it'll save you money at the end of the day. Optimization makes a better product and has savings. Does anyone have a vehicle? Do you ever change the oil? What happens if you didn't change the oil? Eventually it's going to seize up, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't do 10 oil changes, you might save yourself $1,000. But that engine's probably worth $8,000 to $12,000.
It'll probably run a lot longer too.
That's right. That's that optimization. Multiple barriers, they might seem redundant, they might seem like you're saving money if you could get rid of them, but they don't. They're not an unnecessary cost. It's one more level of protection. At the end of the day, if you had to go back and say, well, we were able to save 1%, but Billy's dead. Because what was that sound again? Two. If you could save that
Raised, by the way,
1%,
after
Billy's dead now.
I think I'm doing all the heavy lifting here.
Again, the last line says that having that optimized multi-barrier approach is cost-effective and it helps get the risk to a negligible level for safe drinking water. Trouble is usually preceded by change. Treatment processes generally function best under constant conditions. How many of you drive on the 401 just for fun? Just hands up. Not just for fun. I mean, you have to drive on the 401. How many of you drive on the 401? Just hands up. Now, when you drive on the 401, what's the speed limit?
120.
No, it's 100. It is 100, in case there's any police watching or listening. It is 100. Now, when you drive on the 401, it's not 100, 0, 100, 0. If you drove like that, what would happen?
The floor is going to cave in.
Yeah, the floor's gonna, I know, I've got a bit of heft to me. Sorry about that. But what would happen to the vehicles behind you?
Pissed off.
And they'd probably run into you. When you're running at a steady 120, so that's the speed that people are going, when people are doing 100 and you come up on them on 120, is that when accidents happen? Usually it is. That consistent approach, if you consistently follow that flow of pattern, not fast and slow and up and down and left and right, staying on a steady path provides a more consistent approach and a more consistent product. 70% of all outbreaks have occurred after an extreme weather event, heavy rainfall, ice storms, events like that, unusual conditions. More frequent extreme weather events are happening. In the last 3 years, how many 100-year storm events have we had?
In the last 3 years?
Yeah, at least a couple. How many 100-year floods have we experienced? Extra vigilance is required when we make changes to a process. Because like putting that hammering that nail into the wall, the second you look away is when you hit your thumb. You got to keep that vigilance. And an operator's got to be able to predict and react through their experience. They understand how their system works, they understand what the limitations are, and they know when they're starting to go outside of their norm. That's your best defense as a person in the building. Blaming human error is about as helpful as blaming a fall on gravity. That's a statement, yeah. It's just that some of us fall a little heavier than others. People make mistakes. Systems must be resilient. Again, using the automotive analogy, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to not pay attention. You're going to sit at a text. You're going to write LOL, and you're going to crash into something. And hopefully, your phone gets broken, but you walk out of it because your safety belt worked, your airbag worked, and maybe an autonomous braking system had reduced it so that the impact isn't as bad. People make mistakes. If the system is resilient enough, we all get to go home at the end of the day. Competent and well-informed and dedicated staff are the best insurance. There's that old statement, not all hard-working employees are appreciated, but every appreciated employee is hardworking. When people feel that they're part of a system, when they feel that they're part of a process, they give more. It's not just a financial, it's a way of life. It's a way of looking at things. The operator who can admit that they're going to make a failure and they're going to learn. Failures will happen. But what you got to do is you've got to get there and be able to react to it and minimize the impact and then learn from it. Because you can make a mistake. Just don't make it a second time. And all parties need to learn from the past. You got 100 years of pipe in the ground. 270 kilometers of pipe. So if I were to just work on a rough guess, probably the oldest employee in your distribution system might have 25 to 30 years of experience, correct? Which means that they've seen maybe 30 to 40% of the pipe installed. There's a huge portion of it that's been not in their time frame. So what happens is the things that they've learned, they have to pass down to the next generation. It's that entrained wisdom and knowledge, the transferring of knowledge to the next group, writing it down so that it happened, but we also learn from it so that the next group can make it better, stronger, and faster. Operators have to be capable and responsive. Ontario's operator certification regulation program has dramatically improved. competency of operators. We're changing the way that we're teaching them and the level of responsibility that they have to take on. Ineffective training and support will prove to be a mistake when a disaster comes. If all the training that they've ever had is safe driving, and they don't know how to tap a pipe or to repair a main, your system is going to bleed dry. The training has to be effective. And small drinking water systems are usually supported by larger neighbors. In Eastern Ontario, we have the on-warn system, which we deal with a whole bunch of other municipalities. So if Owen had a problem and he needs a piece of equipment, he says, Perry, do you have this type of PLC component? Yeah, I got one. Goes out to the whole group. I've got 3. Here, I can send them up. I don't care about getting them back. I know I will get them back down the road, but that system is in place, that we are able to work together, because not all of us have the same inventory. And the drinking water professional must be accountable. At the end of the day, if anyone says it's not my job, fire them. That's the end of the day. You promote a culture of identifying trouble, not avoiding it. Yeah, you know what? It takes a big person to stand up and say, I screwed up. Mea culpa. But when they do that, they prevent other people from making the mistake. And if they can see that, you know what, people have the nerve to stand up and admit it, then we all should admit it. You listen to the customer complaint, because outbreaks are usually signaled by customers. Customers are not insane. Only 1% of the population is insane. People don't complain unless they have a problem. There are, yes, I know you're counselors, you've heard all kinds of complaints about all sorts of stuff that might not be relevant. But for the most part, when people complain about water, it's because there's a smell, there's a color, there's some sort of a visual cue that says, you know what, I'm not sure about this. Because as humans, we've been developed. If something smells funny, if it looks funny, or if it tastes funny, we think it's not safe. When was the last time you saw a dead, festering raccoon on the side of the road and thought, lunch? Probably never. When a customer sees a concern about taste, color, or odor, that gives you a signal. Because again, you have 270 kilometers of pipe. And guess where it's laid? In the ground. Is your pipe made out of glass so you can look at it? No, it's hidden. So what's coming out of the customer's tap, if it's the color of that Diet Coke, we got a problem. Management must document the incidents to maximize the opportunities to learn, and the management staff have to support the operators and inform the owners of the issue. So, again, these people back here and over there, they're tools. They're big tools. They're tools for you, but they're also tools for the operational side, which means that they provide the materials, they look for the budget, and they do the things so that the operators can do their job, which is protect public health. Effective risk management requires informed decision-making. How many of you think, you know what, I gotta make an important life decision, heads or tails? Well, when you buy a house based on, is it only on the price? Or, because this house is $300,000 and this house is $300,000. This is a 1-bedroom house and this has 4 bedrooms and I have 4 kids. You buy it based on the needs, the information, what school it's in, what amenities are nearby, if there's restaurants, is there a crack den behind it? You have to look at all the information to make an informed decision, because that's effective risk management. You got to be preemptive, preventative, rather than just reactive. When you're being reactive, you never get caught up. You can have a great big list. Oh, look at all the stuff I did. No, what you did is you just responded to someone else telling you what was to happen. If you're preventative, this list doesn't exist, because you've handled it before it became a problem. Just in simple way of thinking about it, when we get into the examples in the case studies, the term is about 5 or 6 to 1. To deal with something preventatively is about 1/5 to 1/6 the cost of dealing with it in an emergency. When you deal with it in an emergency, there's so much more scrutiny and it's so much more difficult to get things done. And it's too late because it's escalated beyond its level. You deal with greater risks first, Don't go look for the easy thing. Deal with the hard one, because that's what puts most people at risk. And sensible decision-making is based on your commitment to understanding your system. Risk management summary. Your operational plan has an assessment of risk to public health. So when you get your QMS, will you present the entire QMS? No. So you'll get a report that's a statement of the QMS for re-endorsement. If you get the chance, take a look at element 7 and element 8. Element 7 details how you're going to look at your risks, and element 8 is the risks that are inherent in your system. It's what you should look at, because again, it's what makes them. It gives them the heebie-jeebies. If it gives them the heebie-jeebies, it should give you the heebie-jeebies. Risk must be reviewed every 2 to 3 years. Again, the risks that we face change with age. Our system changes. The requirements change, and people's expectations of what we deliver change as well. Understand the risks for your utility and the actions that are being taken to address them. Case studies. Time? 5:25, thank you. I know that you have another meeting, sorry.
It's a pizza word.
It's a pizza, oh, okay. There you go. Priorities. Now, case studies. We're going to look at water-related diseases. We're going to look at the disease outbreak in Walkerton, in North Battleford, Saskatchewan, the lead contamination in Flint, Michigan, and the distribution system contamination in Stratford, Ontario. We're going to analyze the failures and what parts of the multi-barrier system failed. Walkerton. Beautiful little community. That's the Saugeen River there, that bottom slide. Very picturesque. What happened in Walkerton? It's a shallow groundwater well that was heavily contaminated by bacteria from cattle manure. From a local farm. See, water's unique. If you put tea leaves in water, what does it taste like? Tea. If you put coffee grounds in water, it tastes like?
Gold.
Coffee. And if you put meat in water, it tastes like? Meat. Right? Has anyone ever had a hot tub? Because basically when you put meat in hot water, you get soup or stew. And you're just a bag of meat, and that's hot water, so it's you stew. Think about it. It's kind of gross. I just like to ruin hot tubs for everyone. Anyhow, this was contaminated with cattle manure, which means, guess what the water would take on the taste of? Refreshing taste of cattle manure. More than 2,300 individuals were estimated to have become ill, caused by E. coli and Campylobacter jejuni. 2,300 of 3,600. 2/3 of the population became sick. 65 people were hospitalized. 27 developed HUS and 7 died. $9 million public inquiry was led by Justice Dennis O'Connor. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to determine what were the causes of this and recommend actions. And that's why we're here today. The details. Walkerton experienced heavy rain. We never have heavy rain, right? They got 100 millimeters in 2 days. The lab spoke to the general manager. In this case, GM stands for God's mistake, to advise them that the water samples had failed. And at the time, I paid for the samples. I'm the only one that gets the information. Don't give it to anyone else. It's only me. So if I'm not trustworthy, or if I was a liar, I would lie to you. On 3 occasions, the general manager assured the health unit that the water tested results were okay. I'm Roman Catholic. Is there any other Catholics in the room? When was the last time someone was denied 3 times? What happened?
I don't know.
Someone died. The problem with that is that they denied it. They lied about it. 3 times. They could have prevented death. and they didn't. The first victim died in the third week of May, 2000. That's the Saugeen River before and the Saugeen River after the rain. It's quite turbulent. There's a lot of stuff in the water. Well 5 was commissioned in 1978. It was contaminated during the initial and all subsequent tests. It didn't work. It was bad. But you know what? We spent the money on it, so we're going to use it. Despite the problems, the MOE didn't do any inspections in the 80s. Do you guys remember a government by the name of Harris? They cut $322 million from the Ministry of Environment's budget.
Inspectors.
That's right. Do you know how much was cut from the Ministry of Environment just this year? $380 million. What a terrible number set. No inspections occurred at that time. DNA analysis from the human victims matched that of the cattle. So it was cattle poop. There's no question. Chlorine, the disinfection, was not being applied properly. And when you talk about properly, wasn't being applied at all. The investigation showed that the water levels in the nearby surface pond dropped when well 5 operated. It's in a spring. Look at the water's all bubbling up. You turn the wells on, the water stops bubbling. And it takes about 11 seconds. When they put the camera down inside the well, they turn the pump on. It took 11 seconds for the dye to show up from the surface in the bottom of that well. Well 5 was used to obtain soft water at a low cost. Now, if it's a well, wells are in the ground. You know what's in the ground? Rocks. And are rocks soft or hard? Because this is a meme. Rocks are hard, which means they make hard water. Surface water starts with an S, which means surface water is soft. So if you have a well, it should be hard water, not soft water. If you have a well that's soft water, it is surface water, which means you need the type of plant that you have here in Cornwall to treat that water effectively. Just to put it in perspective, because this one really bothers me. When Frank Coble was on the stand in the inquiry, he said on the stand with tears in his eyes, he didn't know. He didn't know that soft water, that shouldn't be soft water. He didn't know that you needed chlorine. He didn't know. You see, you can't breed good help. It's not 2 feet and a heartbeat or fog a mirror. That's not the qualifications. He just didn't know, and what he didn't know caused people's death. And during that examination, he said the girls in the office didn't like the taste of chlorine. So they used to fill the water jugs from well 5 because they didn't add any chlorine to it. And they'd take it and put it in the municipal office for the girls in the office. Frank didn't know anything. He lived across town. The well would be perhaps where the CAO is. And my house is over here on the other side of town. Frank would open up the hydrant at the end of the day. The contamination is there. And when he opens up the pipe, water is going to go to wherever there's an opening. He drew the water through the entire community. He made the situation exacerbate and get worse. The active farm, well 5. Poop rolls downhill and it gathers speed. It went downhill. Now, this chart, this is the number of gastrointestinal cases received at various doctors and health units and hospitals. And you can see, the first attempt on May 13th, there was about 10 people that had bloody diarrhea vomiting. May 12th is when the contamination occurred. May 13th was the first opportunity to do something, and they didn't do it. All they had to do was measure the chlorine residual. But you see, may I ask Owen a question?
Please.
Owen, when you test chlorine residuals, you always get the exact same number all the time, right? No. Can you get it usually 2 times in a row being the same? No. Well, they had the same number for the entire month. And that was right to the end of the month. They had it all filled in because they never tested the chlorine. And it was always the same number, always the same number. If they would have just did the job, they would have known that there was something. If there's supposed to be chlorine there, and chlorine's job is to kill off pathogens, and as long as you have some left over, it's okay. If there's none, you're in deficit. Now, I said at the beginning, I'm Italian, and I have a proclivity to lend money. May I lend money to Councillor Dupel? Councillor Dupel, here's $100. How much money do you owe me in return?
$100,
Well, that's just the demand. Is there going to be some extra?
perhaps.
And that's the protection money, right? See, chlorine's like that. The CT, that's the demand. We've broken the demand. We've killed off the need. Then we put some extra in. That's the residual. That residual goes out in the distribution system, and it protects our system. And if suddenly the chlorine disappears someplace, there's a problem in that place. Something has eaten up the chlorine. Here, it wasn't even leaving the well. There was no chlorine. That should have been their first indication. And that day there was 30 people that were admitted to doctors or to the hospital with vomiting, gastrointestinal distress. On the 17th, Stan Coble, the general manager, he received reports that the water was contaminated. But you know what he did? He buried it. I'll fix it. I know nothing, but I'll fix it. On that day, 130 people in the community on that day became sick with diarrhea and vomiting. On the 18th, it was almost 140, and the health unit says, okay, wait a minute. If we put the last 5 days together, we have more than 500 people. So was there a barbecue? Was there a church picnic? What's going on? Medical officer of health calls up Stan Coble. Stan, is there something wrong with the water? Because now we have 140 people today. We had almost 140 yesterday. We have 140. Is there something wrong with it? No, water's okay. It's all okay. On the 21st, the health unit says, we have no idea what's going on, but the only thing it could be is the water. So we're going to put a boil water on. Because if you boil it, you're going to kill whatever's in that water. On the 22nd, a child under the age of 3 died. On the 25th, they had a media thing where they said that information was withheld. 7 people died in this event. There's 4 children, 2 seniors, and 1 person with a compromised immune system. Because, you see, the pathogens that are in water impact the young, the old, and the weak. And the thing that's really, really horrible about this is that if you have diarrhea or vomiting, what do they recommend? You're losing fluid, so what do they say?
Drink water.
Drink more. And the water's contaminated. Your body is trying to flush it out of you with the diarrhea and the vomiting. And then you put more of it inside of you, contaminating you more. And your body's now saying, holy cow, I got the fever to try and kill. I'm going to get rid of the lining. That's when you get the bloody diarrhea and the bloody vomiting. And they just kept contaminating themselves more. And doctors were recommending to drink more water. The problem with this is that this happened. I lived through this. I remember this. It changed my world. And then 18 years later, it was last year, last summer, you kind of forget about this stuff. It's a traumatic event, but you know what? You get over trauma. This hit me in the face again in the summer of 2018, because one of the people that was seriously impacted had his entire life changed, gallbladder removal, his kidneys failed. He's lived through 18 years of hell from Walkerton for 5 days or 3 weeks of nonsense. He petitioned the federal government for assisted suicide and was granted. So he was put down like a dog because someone didn't know what the hell they were doing. 18 years later, it punches you right back in the face to say, don't ever forget it. Because that's where the complacency comes back in. And it lets you say, we're not going to do this again. On the analysis of the failures in Walkerton, the source water protection, well 5 was known to be bad. They knew it for 22 years before the outbreak, and they kept using it. Never happened. Never happened to us. The geology of well 5, it was in fractured limestone. There's no in situ filtration, and there was clear indications of vulnerability. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, just roll it back one, for 22 years. This is before the Harris government.
Yep.
So where were the inspectors? That they were previously employed.
No one wanted to take ownership of it. See, the problem is that they probably spent a fair amount of money to create a well. They probably used provincial money to fund it, and they didn't want to turn back on it. Because sometimes it's better to just keep putting money hand over fist out the window. It's like raising a daughter. Sorry. I can say that honestly. Our world's changed a lot. So from 1978 to today, our world has changed in ways that are staggering. Things that we didn't consider were an issue are an issue. And a lot of the times we didn't learn, we didn't have the education or the background to give us the understanding of what the problems could be.
Councillor Collinsworth?
Just a question. Who would have ultimately drawn up the specs for the initial construction of that well? Was it a provincial responsibility or was it a municipal responsibility?
Through the chair, municipal responsibility.
Councillor Sid?
When I was reading this to my wife, her question was, how many people went to jail over that?
Through the chair. One person went to jail for less than a year because there wasn't any rules in place to stop it. They had to make up a rule to force this to happen. And that's where the serious issue lies. The rules are in place now to never let this happen again. But nobody did it. So that's who you blame. Nobody.
7 people died.
7 people died. 7 people's lives were cut short. 4 children. God only knows what they could have been. But they never had the opportunity to achieve their abilities.
And somebody did go to jail though?
Stan Coble went to jail
Stan
for
Coble
1
did?
year.
Okay.
On the treatment side, chlorine is needed for disinfection. It was the only step they had. The operators did not measure the residual properly. Yeah, because if you just write it down and never test it, that's not proper. I sound flippant with that, but it's just in complete disbelief what they did. And the chlorine dose was inconsistent and less than required. Because those girls at the office, they just don't like the taste of chlorine. But they do like manure in their water, or they do like getting sick. It was a very egotistical, I'm not going to get into that, sorry. It was just an improper
I have
reaction.
one more question. if
Councillor
you don't
Gordon.
mind. We stopped, and this is a bit of a senior moment, we stopped putting something on our water.
Fluoride.
Fluoride. Would that help, or would that hinder?
I don't get into fluoride debates. Council makes the decision on fluoride. Fluoride is a net neutral. If we are asked to place it in, we do. It's meant for prevention of dental cavities. And if it's not in there, they have proven information, Calgary has proven, that it costs approximately $300 per child under the age of 12 per year. But again, fluoride is almost a religious debate, and when you get into it, it's very,
We know.
yeah.
We've been there.
Thank you, sir.
I just apply it, if I'm asked. And when I'm
Thank
told
you.
not to, I won't.
Last term.
And how much money did you save?
On the distribution side, many distribution storage vulnerabilities were found, but none of them contributed to the outbreak because the problem came from the well, and the system was intact enough that you could draw it through the whole system. But they did find 900 cross connections between wells and other services that are not municipal drinking water. On the monitoring side, daily chlorine testing was not done. Monthly samples were often intentionally mislabeled. They would collect all their samples from one location and say that they were taken from different parts of the town.
Your mics are on, by the way?
Sorry.
Just move your mic.
Sidebar.
Sorry.
Laboratories at that time reported only to the client, not to the Ministry of Health. Today, the rules have changed. It goes to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of the Environment. They know before we know. They know, and the clock starts ticking, and they're waiting for us to respond. We have no ability to hide information. It is open and transparent, 100%. On the management side, the owner, the Utilities Commission, did not provide sufficient oversight. Previous bad samples and issues were raised by the MOE. They falsified data. Again, they wrote the chlorine residual for the whole month. They didn't tell the council that there was problems. System was not maintained because it's only one taxpayer. And the regulator failed in their oversight role. The O'Connor report, they said there was failures at every level, all levels. Complacency was evident everywhere. Multiple factors came together to cause the disaster. Because it's usually not just one thing fails, but many things kick into play. The outbreak could have been reduced or prevented just by doing their job. The microbiological contamination should have been reported to the Ministry of Health. Now it's mandatory. The estimated cost of the outbreak, $72 million. Had they done the preventative maintenance, $10 million. But the cost of living like a third world nation for 9 months, the damage it did to that community was irreparable. Do you have any food processing facilities in your municipality? And what do they make?
Bacon.
Bacon.
So if the water that they had was improper or contaminated and they put their product out, could it impact people outside of your community? So everything that they made is suspect, which means millions of dollars of product gets thrown away. Again, the personal and those social costs are immeasurable. If you want to have a third world nation, just get rid of your water.
That brings a question to mind. They were plugging up our sewer lines with fat and whatever it was. And I wondered how that could transfer into our water. When you're talking about old pipes close to each other, did any of that escape?
That was dealt with though, Councilor?
Yeah, I know, but you don't want it to happen again.
Through the chair to
And
Councilor
across.
Garza. I do exaggerate to some extent the
That's
amount
okay.
of some. It's again, use a little bit of the hyperbole to drive home the fact. So a continuous flushing program or a flushing and it's called FOG, Fat Oils and Greases program is probably instituted through your municipal control, and that will clean out your sewers and it becomes part of a regular maintenance. As our communities are shifting and we're having different ethnic groups moving in, we're starting to see different ways of cooking that are showing higher levels of grease and fat in areas that we never had that before because the drain is being used. So it's part of the learning curve. So. North Battleford, Saskatchewan. This happened approximately 1 year after Walkerton. In the spring of 2001, raw water serving the city of North Battleford, Saskatchewan, population approximately 15,000, was contaminated by cryptosporidium. Cryptosporidium originated 3.5 kilometers upstream of the water intake. An estimated 5,800 to 7,100 people in the region experienced illness, so almost half the population. A public inquiry was held by Honorable Robert Lang. North Battleford, Saskatchewan, so the North Saskatchewan River runs through. So what we have here, see there's this little island, and there's the treatment plant, the wastewater plant, and here's the drinking water plant. Now remember when I said this is $1,500? You're going to see a number at the end that's $600,000. What they would have done if they would have taken that intake or that discharge and put it to this side, guess where it would have went? Away from the water treatment plant, on the other side of an island, not discharging down the same channel as the water plant. This is the river. There's the drinking water intake. There's the sewage plant. You can see. Do we have any fly fishermen here? Anyone fly fish? See, if you stood on that sandbar, you could probably catch zippers. I mean, fly. Because quite literally, it's waste from the sewage plant. That sandbar, it's probably toilet paper and poop, when we really stop and think about it. That's coming straight down the river towards your intake, your drinking water intake. Now that could be a problem, but if you have proper treatment, it's not an issue. But they had a history of sewage treatment problems and the influence of sewage treatment on the drinking water plant. They had boil water advisories the previous year, and they had inexperienced operators performing poorly timed maintenance in March. What happens in March and April? We get a melt, and that's a sudden influx of all kinds of everything that's been held up in the snow, from bird feces, dog feces, you name it. All that stuff's going to come rushing down into your source of water. The foreman retired in December 2000 after previous stress leaves because he was unable to convince management to invest in the sewage plant. Middle of Saskatchewan, municipal employee giving up a job, deciding it's better to retire early than to stay for my maximum pension because it's going to kill me. That's what I'm worried about. They left. The water treatment plant used chlorination. Doesn't work on cryptosporidium. The only way you can get rid of crypto is physically pulling it out through a flocculation system where you pull the dirt together and remove it through sedimentation or filtration. They had improper repair and it compromised the particle removal. This went on from March to May because people kept fighting and not wanting to accept that there was an issue. Direct cause of the outbreak? Direct cause was sewage contamination of the raw water. Cryptosporidium in the sewage led to the outbreak, further complicated. Think about it. See, because, do you ever remember that, was it Pert shampoo? You told two friends, and they told two friends, and, well, that same thing's happening here, because you get a cryptosporidium inside of you. It gets in, that's the right condition, it loses its shell, makes more copies of itself, you crap it out, you send it to the sewage plant, which takes it and dumps it back into the source water. So what ends up happening is that people keep amplifying it. Problem was allowed to persist for 6 weeks. Operators were trying to improve operations to reduce risks. Didn't work. Council and senior management rejected every opportunity for improvement. We'll talk about how really gross it is at the end.
I don't remember it being this gross last term.
No,
I don't.
If it was a shorter presentation, that's probably why.
That's probably why, yeah.
I have a little bit of a flair, I'm sorry.
You're driving the point home, though. That's.
Councillor Grant?
What attempts were rejected?
Through the chair, modifications to the sewage plant, staff training. The staff training is the one that's really disgusting because they had an $800 training budget, and councillors were proud that they've never spent it,
Oh, my God.
ever. And they had large surpluses, and that's,
All budgetary?
what's that?
They were all budgetary.
It was all budgetary. They just wouldn't allow it to happen. In the world of municipal politics, People always remember the builders, they never remember the maintainers. But the maintainers are the most important of them because builders build things, maintainers have to keep it going forever. The initial cost of building something is fractional compared to the cost of its operational life cycle. So when you add capacity, you gotta remember, there's an OpEx component to it that goes on long beyond the capital component. So, sorry, I digress. There was a long history of poor sewage performance. No actions were ever taken for past problems, and the city continued to dispute the sewage theory even after it was essentially proven. You see, because the cryptosporidium from the people came from people. It had human DNA, which was coming, means that it passed through a person to get to the person. And where does the person material go to? Top of the water cable again. On the treatment side, chlorination did not work. It won't work. You have to physically take it out. They had poor timing for the repair of their solids removal system, which caused it to lose its blanket. If it lost its blanket, the particles go through and they carry on. And it shouldn't have been tolerated. They let it go on for way too long, weeks. The operators didn't understand that they were out. They didn't understand the limitations of the system. They thought the system could handle it. There was no issues on the distribution system, but on the monitoring side, the operators did not perform the tests that they were required because they didn't know. What was the job you'd held last? I was the ditch digger. Okay, you can run the water plant now. Okay. Operating procedures were outdated. Does anyone work on vehicles? Anyone work on cars? If I were to give you a 1974's Hayes manual for a Gremlin, could you go fix my rental car? Which is a 2000 Land Rover Discovery. Could you fix it with the 1974 Hayes manual?
Highly unlikely.
They're impressed by the rental vehicle you just.
Yeah.
I got it for $34. Score. And the operators had a lack of experience and training. So if you don't have the right materials to actually fix something, it says turn this knob. There's no knob there. You gotta have the right procedure in place. And they didn't know what they were dealing with. They couldn't make anything better. On the management side, the owner failed to provide the resources to run the system. Poor, there was regulatory neglect again. Poor communication between the health unit and the city caused it to go on for 6 weeks. As with Walkerton, the case study revealed failures at every level. Unlike Walkerton, there was evidence that the operators were trying to do the job. They just didn't have a clue what the hell they were doing. And that's a problem. Because you have to be competent and capable and responsive. And that's why we've got to keep training the operators. And that's why our systems are in place. And there was little evidence that lessons were learned from things that happened in the past. The Canadian Environmental Law Association, CELA, the people of North Battleford were let down. The refusal to spend money on the system despite a large contingency fund. The provincial government was aware of problem, but they hadn't done an inspection in 10 years. Inexperience of operators were unable to heed the warning signs, and the out-of-court settlement was $3.2 million. They could have fixed it by $600,000, just extending that pipe and a little bit of training. I won't even ask this question because all you'd have to do is just spend the money that you had available. Flint, Michigan.
Councillor Gardner?
I have to ask you this question. In the last number of years, how did Ottawa get away with dumping sewage into the Ottawa River year after year? And are they still doing it? And what are the consequences? Or were there any consequences?
There were consequences, through the chair. There were consequences. They dumped over 1 billion liters, and it was because of a faulty valve. One person had gone to jail, and a large turnover in the administration of the wastewater side of the system occurred. There was a purge in 2000, I'm going to say 16 or 15. They purged a huge amount. Almost 1/3 of the senior administration was purged and turned over.
It was disgusting. Every time I saw it on the news, it was disgusting what they were doing.
Council Bergeron?
I guess I'm a little confused. Can you explain we don't approve something in a budget? Like, how do we know the repercussions of not approving something in a budget beforehand?
In all honesty, the operational staff that come to you, they're not coming to you with dreams. They're coming to you with needs, not wants, not dreams, but needs. Usually in a budget, they're not going to ask you for more than they will have. And if you're operating correctly, it's going to fall more on the treasurer than just the operational staff. Because the responsibility of the treasurer through, what's the bill? It's 519 now? It's the financial requirements for drinking water systems. So your rate structure has to stabilize so that you have a true user pay system. So your rates actually, you have to have a rate study to determine what the full cost of your system will be to repair. Just looking at your system based on numbers, you have probably somewhere in the vicinity of depreciated value of about $380 million between your water and sewer systems. If you're looking at a 100-year life expectancy on that, that means that you're going to have to spend somewhere in the vicinity of $3.8 million just to maintain what you have to replace it once every 100 years, not including what's new. So your system has to look at your operating expenditures and your capital expenditures for future growth. So a good rule is based on the 2% thumb. So you might be looking at someplace in the vicinity of $7 million by the time you fully extend out your costing. Your treasurer will do a tremendous amount of work with operations to figure out how to build these costs in. It's a little different than the standard operating budget because in the system that we have, we put the money in the previous year and then we exchange it, we take it out in the next year. We build surpluses so that if we have a project that's a $6 or $7 million project, we build the surplus necessary to do it. But the rate structure is the key. So when you approve the rate structure, you're basically approving the concept of moving forward with the maintenance requirements. And when the staff comes to you because of deficiencies in the plant or it's bumped up on a threshold, they're coming because they're hitting either a mandatory rate because they're too close to the edge for production, or they're looking at it from a rehabilitation and improvement rate. Through the chair, is that acceptable? It's a lot.
The answer, I just find it strange. I still don't know if we can tie a dollar figure to a repercussion beforehand. You know, it's not like they would come and say, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. Or certainly that's not what we got
No.
in December. Tax rates and budgets is kind of our job here. So I'm just wondering how that information can come to us maybe a little differently. Yeah, maybe it's not a for you answer, but
The last time we went through this, through you, Madam Mayor, it was explained that if there's an ask from the water plant for new filters, and this is the cost, and in the budget, we turn it down, but 2 or 3 of the councilors voted in favor of putting the money forward, they would be free of the responsibility, and the others would. That was brought to us the last time I went through this.
Want to comment on that?
is that true?
Because if it's a recorded vote, yes, it would be able to show it's in documentation. It's not, again, to use it as a pure threat. The whole point of doing a filter maintenance program is that the anticipation is that there's a life expectancy of this material. We like to replace it before the expectancy is completed because failure leads to public health risk. And they know what the limitations are legislatively. So when the rate structure is put in place, what that does is it gives them their operating expenditures plus capital expenses without debenturing. When you have to go to debenture, that means that your system has hit something that's known as an 85 percentile, which means that it's at 85% of its capacity and you have to expand beyond that. And that's a legislative threshold. There's no one that's going to come up to you and say that you have to do this, and if you don't, people are going to die. most of the things, the reason that we come to you beforehand is that we don't want it to get into a situation where we go down that slippery slope. And I'll be honest, I am the consummate minimalist. When you take the money based on your system, your water and sewer needs for your community, the average residential household in your community is $2.17 a day. My 4 shots of espresso in this cup pays for 2 days
Like the coffee.
for a home. And that's just for me, for this meeting. That $2.17 represents every person in that household. And then to make it even further, I did some calculations. Because again, we see these dollars and we think, oh, it's a huge amount. But when you spread it across the entire cost, or the entire time factor, and break it across the entire base, you actually see how small it is. Flint, Michigan is disgusting, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I used $250,000 as being your average home cost here in Brockville. Times, or sorry, Cornwall, sorry, my apologies.
Very sensitive.
I'm sorry. In Cornwall, at $250,000 based on your rate of 1.47% for residential for your mill rate, which means that you come out to about $3,700. Take away the 45% that you guys don't get to keep, gives you about $2,000. That means that for every house, you provide all your services, your city hall, your arenas, your roads, your sidewalks, your lights, your fire department, your police. Everything that you provide works out to $5.53 a day for a house. You ain't gonna get anything of that value anywhere. That's not even a Whopper Wednesday deal. It's not a value meal. So when you look at it as the big picture, yeah, $1 million or $10 million or $50 million seems huge. But when you amortize it across 100 years, the whole point of doing it is to try and get ahead of the curve, because then you come in afterwards, you're gonna pay a lot more. Once you hit the limit, you can't expand. You have to start fresh. So the whole thing is to keep that progressive movement so that you don't get hit with the $100 million or the $200 million cost in production. And in the city of Belleville, we're no different. We've held off on our sewage system for years. And our sewage system now, we're looking at someplace between 78 million and 150 million, depending on what build out you look at. It's a huge cost expenditure, and at some point, we have no choice. We have the regulatory requirements that we have to meet. It's hard. And we're not gonna say that we're gonna kill people, because that would ensue panic in the streets. But it's a requirement that we have to meet. It's a due diligence.
Go ahead.
Flint. Flint, Michigan is inherently disgusting. Flint went bankrupt due to shrinking population from the declining auto industry. Flint switched from the city of Detroit water supply, treated, to the untreated Flint River for financial reasons. They had a state-appointed manager, emergency manager. They made all of the decisions. Council and the mayor made no financial decisions, period. All they were there for was cutting ribbons. Anything that dealt with financials, they had no say in it. America. Water chemistry differed significantly between the two sources. The Flint drinking water treatment plant was put into service before it was ready. Drinking water was sent to the customer without appropriate treatment. Municipal bankruptcy is not likely here in Canada, but we have all kinds of financial troubles. There's no question. You're trying to be fiscally responsible, and the dollars just get more and more aggravated. Those are decisions the council has to make, and it's tough. In Flint's case, source water. The river received unregulated discharges. So they had chroming plants, they had foundries, they had automotive production. There was no checks and balances. They discharged to the river for decades. Contamination was not the main cause of the problem, but the chemistry in the river was progressively different. If I were to give you $1 a day, a loonie a day for 10 years, after 10 years, you'd have approximately 3,655 loonies in your hand. And then I asked you to go to Gananoque to the casino and spend it. It wouldn't last that long. Depends on what type of gambler you are, I guess. The issue with Flint, Michigan is that the water quality that was prior to it allowed the buildup of materials and scale inside the pipe. And then when they changed the water chemistry to a different source, that was more corrosive, caused that scale to deteriorate and dissolve, allowing leachate of lead and other metals into the water that weren't normally present, because it's something that built up over decades. The water was softer, so it was more chemically aggressive. On the treatment side, the treatment process was very poorly controlled. It was trial and error. Well, that didn't work. Let's do something else. There was no corrosion control despite a strong indication that it was necessary. And inadequate equipment and ineffective operations. And the water was contaminated with E. coli. And E. coli means fecal. THMs and bromate. And it provided favorable conditions for Legionella. And Legionella gets aspirated. So you could be in the shower and you can breathe it in. And that's how it's going to hit you. Now, what was disgusting is I don't have any change, so I can't really commit to this. The community had a population of about 100,000. The manager said if the plant went in service, it would be against their direction. They have a population around 100,000. It would cost approximately $100 a day to run the system for corrosion control. Community's bankrupt. We can't afford $100 a day. That's $36,000 a year. $36,500. We can't afford that. It's too much. Let's see, there's 100,000 people in the community, 36,500 divided by 100,000 works out to about 36.5 cents per person. So what the controller said was that your life, your water quality, and jeopardization caused by lead and other things, because they knew what could happen, wasn't worth 36 cents a day. You could take a loonie out, slap it on the table, and say, you know what, let me look after my wife, my child, and myself for the year. And they weren't even worth that. And what's even more disgusting is that half the population in Flint is below the state poverty line. And where do poor people live? Usually in the more rundown, older parts of town, which have lead services. And lead causes a mental deficiency and a slowing in development in children under the age of 2. On the monitoring side, test results were intentionally omitted to reduce the averages. Well, that one's high, throw that one out. Test results by experts were dismissed as inaccurate. Fake news. That's all I can say. There was poor record keeping. Monitoring equipment was not installed. And the water treatment quality varied widely, suggesting poor operation because the system wasn't ready. On the management side, all levels failed. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, the MDEQ, their health department, Genesee County Health Department, and the U.S. EPA. They all were arguing, and the emergency manager the whole time was making the decisions. So it would be like living here in Cornwall and someone from Toronto came in to make the decisions financially for your community. Do they know what the responsibilities and needs for your community are better than you? No, they don't. Council had no input. On Flint, all the barriers failed. 15 individuals were criminally charged: involuntary manslaughter, conspiracy, misconduct in office, willful negligence of duty, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. And I used to joke around and say that sounded like the Trump election team, until the fact that every single one of those people were let off on their charges this year. Involuntary manslaughter. That charge didn't stick. Willful negligence of duty didn't stick. People died because of complications of other issues, and no one's responsible. Flint Public Works' role in the crisis appears attributed to an inexperienced, poorly resourced organization struggling to take on an enormous, unattainable responsibility. The Environmental Quality Department caused the crisis to happen. Moreover, when confronted with the evidence of its failures, It responded publicly through formal communication with a degree of intransience and belligerence that has no place in government. The social contract doesn't exist in some places anymore. It's whatever gets the soundbite. And unfortunately, we're only a stone's throw away from a lot of that. Concluding thoughts, March 17, the Canadian government looked at instituting a new lead guideline, taking the number from 10 micrograms per liter down to 5. The province of Ontario has instituted that new lower level this year. Stratford, finally a decent one. Time?
6:13.
13.
Okay. Key events, first 70 minutes. At 7:20 a.m., a call came into the city water division, pink foaming water from tap. It was actually, should my water be pink, foaming, and smell like pina coladas? To which they said, no. 10:30, water supervisor confirms, yes, the water is pink and foaming and smells like pina coladas. At 11 o'clock, they visited the adjacent car wash. 11:07, they called the health unit, because now they have the MSDS. At that time, it was an MSDS. Now it's an SDS. And they began flushing. There's the car wash. There's the house. Close proximity. At 11:40, meeting with City Hall Health Unit and the MOE occurred. At 12 o'clock, a drinking water advisory was issued. We'll see that on the next slide. 12 o'clock, emergency plan was called out. The emergency control group convenes, which probably many of you are on that group in this room. So at 12 o'clock, a drinking water advisory was issued. And then this is the only thing I'm critical of. At 1 o'clock, they called the restaurants. Now we could do the dishes after the lunch run. The water's safe for that. Through the chair.
Yes. Councillor Lane?
Was that just one house that had the pink foaming water coming from its tap?
One complained.
Okay, thank you.
At 1 o'clock, they made arrangements to make an alternate supply of water. Think of your community, and you have a population of?
48,000.
Imagine providing a minimum of 2 liters of water for every man, woman, and child in your community as an alternate source. There's a logistics nightmare to that. This is the media release from the Office of the Mayor. In the red, it says, until further notification, all residents of Stratford are urged not to consume the water. As well, residents should not feed the water to pets or use the water for bathing or washing. There's nothing left. Watering your lawn, I guess. The emergency. The duration, 56 hours. Number of volunteer hours, 640, because there's 80 volunteers. Number of flyers delivered, 13,160 times 4. Number of homes water was delivered to, so elderly residents or people that were homebound, 391. Bottled water, 24,000 cases of water were distributed. Bulk water, 200,000 liters were put up in servicing depots. Staff manned those depots for a total of 825 hours, costing $188,000. The website during the incident received 4,500 hits, normally receives 500 a month. That's one way to get your social media presence up, eh? Source water protection. Stratford's water was great. They got 11 wells. There was no problem with the wells. The wells were all inspected. They are high quality. On the treatment side, again, the groundwater's high quality. There's no issue. There's no contamination from treatment. They did what they were supposed to do. They did their job. On the distribution and storage, the contamination was the direct result of an illegal cross-connection at the car wash. Detergent, a 210-liter drum, was inadvertently pumped into the municipal water supply because backflow prevention equipment was not installed. You can't buy a pump anywhere in the world that can outpower 65 PSI, right? We'll see on the next slide what happens. This is the setup that they had. In my world, you can't have that. It's not NSF. That piece of galvanized pipe is like really a bad no-no. copper, web tubing, and that little valve, that's the backflow prevention device. The pump that was inside the car wash produced 80 PSI. City's pressure was 65. Which one's greater? Pumped out the 210 liters of fluid into the system. On the monitoring side, monitoring activities were not implicated in the contamination because they actually used their monitoring capabilities to figure out when the water was safe. They immediately sprang into action. This is a positive one. Even though it was a failure, it made an issue become relevant and people took notice. On the management side, backflow prevention devices are plumbing. That's what they are. They're not really part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. They're not regulated under it. City Council at the time had implemented a backflow prevention bylaw in 2004. The problem with the backflow prevention bylaw, you got to enforce it, which means you got to have people, which means you have to have inspectors and you have to check things. And just like anything else, the minute you walk away, what's to guarantee that it's still in service? It's challenging. It's really challenging, but it was critically important. They had a lot more buy-in after this incident from the community at large for the backflow prevention bylaw. But backflow prevention bylaws, if you're in that process, are you in the process? Yeah, it's tough. It's a lot of work. You can find a guidance document, the Public Information Bulletin System, number 9676E. If we look at the case studies, fecal contamination, pathogens, and potential contaminants are everywhere. Some pathogens are difficult to treat. Cryptosporidium, you're not going to treat it with chlorine, you got to physically remove it. There was an outbreak in Milwaukee in '93. Milwaukee, 1 million people in the community, 400,000 became sick, and depending on what set of numbers you have, it's anywhere from 50 to 200 died. Complacency can rise anywhere because waterborne outbreaks are rare. If it doesn't happen and you're not paying attention, that's when it'll happen. And when you relax the vigilance, it can lead to disaster. Distribution systems are vulnerable because they're generally not visible. And when you do see them, that means there's a leak. Leaks in pipes can allow, what's that sound? Yeah, can lead to contamination entering the system, and cross connections can pose a risk, even with backflow prevention bylaws are in place. The red comment, issues that initially appeared to be of little concern come under intense scrutiny if something goes wrong. Perhaps that's more of the comment towards the earlier question. If you said no to something, I guarantee there's going to be 1,000 people that'll go back if there was a problem, and they will find every single person that said something to the contrary. Hindsight is 20/20. Forward vision is hard. It's very difficult. But if an event occurs, you will be scrutinized. It doesn't matter. You say the wrong thing, you will have an integrity commissioner all over you. You will have people in the press, no offense, scrutinizing every word you say. So what's next? The practical steps that you can take to ensure effective oversight. Ensure good internal and external communications. Talk to the staff. Have them provide you with reports, with information. Promote a mentality of continuous improvement, because if you're standing still, you're going to get passed. Promote the understanding of an entire system. One piece is a very navel-gazing way of looking at it. If you're looking for the lint in your belly button, you'll find it. But if you have to look at the entire thing, I do an exercise with my staff to point out the differences of the way of approval. I draw a small box on the whiteboard where there's all kinds of information written on it. And I say, tell me 4 things about the box. They say, well, it's not quite square, you've overlapped, and it's red. And I said, okay, you know what I'd tell about it? That it's very little of this entire piece of information. Look at the big picture, not the small focus. Challenges need to be understood, and we have to know what our limitations are. Always maintain a robust multi-barrier approach. protect from source to tap, and commit to learning from past mistakes. Because if we don't do it again, we could have a better outcome. Enable recognition of new risks and threats by operational staff, which means they will have to take different types of training. Because 5 years ago, blue-green algae was not on anyone's agenda. Have you heard of cyanobacteria and blue-green algae? That's one of the big risks now. It wasn't there 5 years ago. It was there 5 years ago. It's been around for 1.5 billion years. It's just that it's become a risk because it's become identifiable. Ensure that all staff understand that they're entrusted with protecting public health. That's the job of an operator. It's a guardian of public health. Justice O'Connor specified it. He said, operational personnel should be given the status, training, compensation comparable to the responsibilities as guardians of public health, which means you have to provide sufficient resources. In this world, Your Worship, may I just ask general questions?
Please.
Is a doctor's job important? Is a firefighter's job important? Is a police officer's job important? If a police officer makes an error in judgment at a scene, can people die?
Yes.
If a firefighter makes an assessment, an incorrect assessment at a site, can people die?
Increase the risk.
And if a doctor makes an improper diagnosis, can people die? Can it put life at risk? Of course it can. The operator at the plant follows that same category. The only difference is the limitation of those three jobs is micro. It's to the immediate individuals that are impacted. So it's the site, it's the incident, or the individual. If he makes the mistake, it affects everyone in your community. It's a macro impact, because if it goes out of the plant, it's impacting every potential man, woman, and child. And that's where the responsibility level never dies. The people that are in this industry have gray hair, or they lose it. Because a lot of the time, you're always what-ifing yourself to death. You're trying to figure out the 10,000 ways around the scenario and how I can get around it to get to the next day. How can I mitigate that risk? There's that information about Milwaukee. What they say here was 400,000 cases of cryptosporidiosis, 4,400 hospitalizations, and 50 deaths. Again, it varies. Now, we have inspection reports. So municipal drinking water systems are now inspected every year. That's part of the outcome of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And inspections include source water, treatment process, distribution components, looking at the water quality monitoring, and procedures and practices so that we can see, what are we doing? Are we ensuring that we're doing it correctly? An inspection report will highlight areas of non-compliance that require corrective action. The report will include an inspection rating to compare current and past performances and areas for improvement. So, Your Worship, may I ask Owen a question? Owen, what was your inspection report? 100%. And the year before that? Okay, the year before that? For 11 years. For 11 years. That's a great record.
Yeah, very nice.
But there's things like best practices in them, isn't there? And when you look at the best practice, you try to implement them. And the best practice is where the ministry now is taking a proactive approach and saying, these are things and these are areas that we're finding that people are falling down on. Or these are the next things that we're concerned about. Start moving towards that. And that's where, if there's no non-compliances, that's great. That's fantastic. There might be best practices to get better on. And if there is a non-compliance, that's great. Don't ever do it again. The key takeaway is learn from the mistake. The report includes the inspection rating, as I said, review this report and the actions being taken to the response. And the summary report and annual report are also required under municipal. So you'll get it in March or February, your summary and annual report that tells you what happened the previous year. Training and succession planning. Ensure that operational staff receive meaningful training and confirm that you have a training plan. Training may need to go beyond just the regulated requirements to address the needs for the future, and it takes several years for a new operator to progress to a Class 3 or Class 4. So if you are coming out of school with 2 years post-secondary education, it's going to take you 6 years in the field, plus writing exams and time served. It's like an apprenticeship, but you have to write exams every year, plus take training during that whole time. And you will get your level 4, but it'll take you 6 years. In the summary, we need to foster competence. People have to know how to do their job. We have to eliminate the complacency, because the complacency leads us to failure. We need to instill the culture of prevention, because if it doesn't break, you don't have to react to it. We have to learn from the mistakes of the past. We have to emphasize good practices, promote the continuous improvement to keep getting stronger and better, and provide the resources needed to improve. At the beginning, you had 3 things. It was your duty to provide safe drinking water. It was your duty to be informed. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to be informed, and you have a duty to be vigilant so that you don't let your guard get down. If you put them all together, it's your duty to be informed and vigilant. As a counselor or a senior manager, that's your job. It's your duty to be informed and vigilant, to understand the risk. Thank you. Now, I talked a lot about time.
Is that really your name?
30.
No, that's Brian. 6:30? Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute 2 things.
Yep.
You're going to get a test. You put your name on it. Your name. Because if you put someone else's name, they'll get your credit. We'll take it up at the end together. So we have a test. It's open book.
Okay, great.
We also have this. On the back is a bunch of courses. So in case you're interested in some courses, you might not. But what this does is it tells Walkerton that you might be, this area is interested in this type of course, so you might see it more relevant. And then there's an assessment here. As part of the continuous improvement, what Walkerton does wants to know, how did these sections relate to you? Was it something of very poor to excellent for each of the modules? How was the course content, and how was my delivery? We don't have anything on here for food, so the pizza's going to show up, so I better hurry up. Okay, so we're going to distribute these, and then we'll take these up, and then you'll be free of me.
Thank you very much. Been very informative.
Do you want us to do this right now?
Yes.
Yes?
If possible.
Thanks, Ellen.
What's the date today?
Today's the 29th.
29.
Heard me.
Can't even pass the first one.
You got my name right.
You got my name. Oh, you got misspelled. At least that'll have to get in trouble later on if we botch it up. See their input.
Is anyone not signed?
I signed on their behalf. I put in their names.
Oh.
So the first 3 on the first page.
My signature?
Michael.
Maureen, Eric, and Justin.
Mhm.
Oh, no, not, sorry, Todd.
Jennifer, Sean.
No, the other side. First 3?
Okay. All right, perfect, thank you. Did you guys watch your name tags? if you want to use your tools, just call them.
Hey Jules, what's the answers to,
That's hilarious.
Guess that means he's not answering any questions.
Answer any question you want.
like in school where we like pass over
No,
or?
no, no.
Exactly.
You will mark your own, and I have to have confidence and faith in you.
So we should have did it in pencil then, is that what you're telling me?
You should act with honesty, integrity, and competency. And if you do falsify your information, I do see it at the end.
If you're interested in anything, I guess. You're not paying attention to the teacher?
No.
What do you tell your students when they're not paying attention?
Future endeavors, that's
Yeah, I was one of those kids that didn't pay attention in class.
You're looking for the answers online, Todd.
Just call it.
These answers are in the book?
Fun way to spend my vacation.
Educational.
Couple more moments, and then you'll be done with me.
Oh, you're here, you should try some of our drinking water.
I did.
Is that what this is?
That's what this is, filled it in the cooler outside.
Excellent, right? Yeah.
If I could, I would have went down to the water plant.
Well, so
Fresh
that's what
stuff.
We've been to our
Right
secondary,
off the filter.
treatment. Have you been?
I haven't been to your new sewage plant.
Stuff
$58 million project.
I know.
On time, on budget.
You have
know what?
secondary treatment in
Down
Belleville?
River. We're secondary in Belleville, yes,
We were the last ones.
but we have a lot of work to do for the future.
Oh, yeah?
We just had a public information center where it's a minimum 78 million.
But you got a hockey team.
Well, we do have a hockey team too.
We went through that.
Are you? Yeah. Well, the thing is,
So all the more reason, Madam Mayor, for us to.
All right, so are we ready?
Let's go, yeah.
Okay. Question number 1. Mayors, council, and municipal officials with oversight responsibility need to be experts.
False.
False. Question number 2. Which of the following are generally perceived as the greatest threat to safe drinking water?
A.
A. Pathogenic disease-causing organisms. Who does the standard of care apply to under Section 19?
D.
D. Any person with decision-making responsibility for a drinking water system. Which of the following is not directly a component of the multi-barrier approach?
D.
But if you were doing marijuana dispensaries, wouldn't that be one of the things you did? That's right. C. Customer surveys are not a multi-barrier approach. Given the circumstances that occurred in Walkerton, which of the following is true?
C.
Public inquiry suggested failures at all levels. Question number 6. Who made the financial decisions that led to the crisis in Flint, Michigan? B. The state-appointed emergency managers. Inspection of a drinking water system by a regulator are useful because?
D.
All of the above, because they can help identify problems, they can provide a report for guidance, and provide a comparison to the past. Question number, how many are at 7? How many got up, decided they're done now? No, you gotta stay till the end. No mic drop.
I said 7's a pass.
This is a celebration of knowledge, not a pass-loss game.
That's all I need.
Pathogenic organisms are a widespread risk of causing waterborne disease because found virtually wherever people and animals are found. Question number 9. Reliance on source water protection as the sole barrier to drinking water contamination is?
C.
It's a risky idea because there's only practical limits. And the last question. Why is it important to provide sufficient resources for operating a drinking water system?
C.
D.
B.
I'm a genius.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will pick these up, and I'll take these, I'll let someone else collect the surveys, because I don't want to have the surveys go too fast, because then if I look at it.
First question wrong.
Okay, so I want to thank you.
Okay, I got it right now.
Sir, you give a very dramatic presentation,
100.
ably assisted by Councillor Hollingsworth. Sound effects.
I'm here for you.
It's clear that we have responsibilities as a council, and it's clear that we have a good relationship with staff and that that's important. So, thank you.
And Owen needs a raise in pay.
Especially after the hug.
So I was talking to Dr. Hall, and he was
11 straight
I
years
can
of
prove
100%.
it to you that in the, I don't know how many years before it's been, there's been an increase in that. He's like, okay, prove it, and you put it back in. If you can show me the.
Safe travel back to Belleville.
I'm not
Thank you.
opposed to bringing
Spend
it
some
back.
money while you're here, sir, in your Land Rover.
It's not mine,
Well,
it's rental, but dinner's a good idea.
dinner's a
I
great
told-
idea.
this was a couple months
I just
ago,
need
and I was
the,
like, I got it.
clicker.
It's coming to council.
Hometown.
He's supposed to
Belleville?
come back to council with it, but I haven't talked to him since.
Okay, we need a motion. Madam Clerk?
It seems to me
Report on the agenda recommends that council endorse the
Yeah.
drinking water quality management system operational plan.
Okay, Councillor Elaine McDonald, sorry, we're doing a motion quickly?
I'm voting.
You're voting for it? Okay. So who's making the motion? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Gardner. All in favor? Thank you.
So,
Motion to adjourn? Councillor Grant, Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. There's pizza,
unreal
and
amount
they're gonna set up for the PAC meeting now.
to get it out. Like more than I was expecting, so I sort of,
unreal, like people wanted it out.
do you want it?
They want fluoride more.
Yeah. more than those who,
Why would
like,
they
that
not
reached out
want-
to us, right?
Why
So,
would they not want fluoride in the water?
I don't know.
What rationale did they give? Because they didn't want to spend the money?
We had an expert
Why would you not
for
have
and
fluoride?
against come and present, and it's a fucking ordeal.
information came off the internet.
Don't tell me, does it
Should I
cause
just sit on
cancer
one
or
of
some nonsense?
No, no, I don't know.
Sign it now.
I just, it's so dramatic and,
And you had the East, Calgary who stopped
fine, I
doing it, and then they put it back in again.
well, that's the thing, is if it's, anyways.
How much money, so what, we're talking a couple $100,000?
I don't know how much, I have no idea.
That would
It's a
be
long time ago. And I
Couple
was
years
like,
You don't
I had
remember?
no idea what I was doing. Like, I only figured out